line. I skipped, I guess, 14, 15 years while my wife was on the school board. And I had lost a commission race. And so she was there for 16 years, and then had a young man we thought was going to run in her place. She didn't want to run again. She was there with all the Charles Lark deals and everything, and that had problems with that. So, but then he decided he was moving to Columbia County within a short period, and it turned out to be almost a year. But so at the last minute, I was at church getting a youth group off, and she had gone walking with some friends at the mall, and she stopped. I said, well, I think you better start making a decision. It was close to 11 o'clock on Friday and closed at 12, so she called down, and sure enough, the same candidate had qualified to run against her again for, I guess, the third or fourth time, the perennial candidate. I can't remember his name.
Ingham?
Huh? Ingham, yeah, Robert Ingham. And we walked in the courthouse probably 10 or 15 minutes till 12, and he said, well, good to see you again. She said, oh, no, it's going to be him. And he made the comment later on, not that day, but later, he said, well, you were always real nice. Mr. Padgett's all business. And I said, yeah, that's right.
Well, let's talk about the business, because incumbents often are reluctant to give up their seats for several reasons, but usually one reason is that they don't feel like they've finished what they sought to accomplish in their seat. So is there anything that...
Well, I think mainly, and this is really a factor, because Richmond County, in a racial standpoint, I mean, the only really mixed district. And I know our illustrious mayor tried to make me a 78% black precinct, I guess, 2009, 2010, when we were redoing the census and all, and I was vice chairman of the committee, and one of the commissioners was chair, and we had everything set. It hired this lady who worked at Secretary of State's office previously to balance the numbers out. And the last meeting, the mayor came in with his own program, and it was voted by minority vote. I think it was 8-7, and that was the makeup of the committee. And I got tired of talking about it, so I said, well, I'll take it to Atlanta, and I did, and took it to the Senate, and they turned the House's proposal down, and then it went back to the House. I thought that was it, but it didn't. They went back to the House, and they turned down the Senate proposal, so it went to federal court. And Randy Hall was the judge. He had just been made judge, and Randy and I've been working with children's issues for probably 25 or 30 years, so I was glad to see that. So he actually gave me 2 percentage points less minority than I had agreed to, 54%, so 52. But just looking at the voter list and, doing the mail out and all, it's changed probably 4 or 5% since 2010. So, but that gives us balance, really, 5-5. And I've looked at the commission race again and decided I'd prefer to stay on the board, 4 years ago. And of course it switched over there to a 4-6 minority. And that's one of the reasons. And then too, I think I'm at the point the system's probably in better condition than it's been in the last 20 or 30 years anyway. Mm-hmm. And I'm proud of that, and have played a role in that, and with our superintendent. And I'm finance chair, and I think that's a critical position. So I just want to keep on keeping on, I guess.
Do you think as a whole the 8 districts as they were drawn have been a pretty good balance, yeah. And this was the mayor's one comment. They didn't need to have a 90-something% minority district. And of course he wanted to put all those in my district. Of course that would give him actually 6 votes. He was a senator at the time, but he wasn't mayor. But give him automatic 6 votes against 4 from a minority standpoint. So I figured I would block it. I didn't think that was fair, and I didn't think it was fair, particularly that he came in the last meeting, the only one he attended with his own program that we had spent time and money on to do ours. So, but continuing what we're doing, and I think I add stability to the board with not only length of service, but having been involved in education probably too many years to think about now, probably more than 40. So I started out, of course, as a parent involved, but then my era as PTA president began with presidency. I was in Atlanta with my job every third Thursday that they met, and hadn't attended a meeting. And I got elected president. And of course, the interesting thing there was that a good friend of mine didn't want to be president. He was vice president and a great worker. He just didn't want to run the meetings and everything. So we did that. And our main project after a couple of months became air conditioning in school. Now that was a school that was named for Roy Rollins, which is a school superintendent, well built. And we raised funds, and I convinced the school system to share the cost. We raised $30-something thousand, and this is in 75, 77, that era. And so we got air conditioning. Several other schools proposed doing it, but didn't. But then I guess I went on the school board maybe a couple of years later. And one of the things we did was pass a rendition to air condition all the old schools. And now we've taken a lot of them down. So, and Rollins will become part of Seago Rollins and probably next fall.
Well, a lot of things have changed since then, and now today, there's probably the air conditioning, I'm sure, is the least of the issues that you're covering now.
Oh, very, very, very much.
What are
so.
some of the biggest issues that the school board is facing now that you'd like to tackle?
Well, academics, I always think comes first, and we've built that up, and I know we've got a press conference coming sometime in the next several weeks where the governor will release all the information, but we've had good progress all the time there. And I think the interesting thing is that we're working with the little kids, particularly the ones that aren't on grade level by third grade, by putting them in special programs. We had it at National Hills originally, and now we've got it at Jenkins White. And it's taken on a lot of kids, and really the successes we've had, about 35% of them do get on grade level at the end of the year. But you're talking 10 to 15 kids in a class with an aide, and really concentrating to bring them up to par. And of course, we just realize that if they're not on par by the third grade, they're probably not going to get there. They just keep going backwards. And I think that's critical, because these are the kids that are generally either going to drop out or something, and if we can keep a few of them. And I think also the program where we're inviting back older students, many of them married and working, to get their high school diploma, which we run that program at Tubman. And some of the programs that we're working, like alternative schools, don't do as good a job as I would like to see done, but it helps quite a bit, and we're working on ideas to try to improve that. And financially, we've been able to balance the budget, and of course we have to legally, and expand some programs, and some of that has been cutting some staff where we were actually overstaffed. And Dr. Pringle's idea there is to make sure you have the right number of staff and not overstaffed, and we can build some other programs there.
What areas were overstaffed? What kind of
There are schools just by one or two people, and so and then some of these were not the best qualified people in town either. So we were able to remove some of those from the classroom, which is a good plus too. You don't leave them sitting there because they're not up to par. The students won't be up to par.
My wife's a teacher.
Oh, really? Which school?
Lakeside High School in Cleveland.
Oh, okay. Good school.
And she and so many of her colleagues have long said that one of the biggest challenges is getting parents involved in the process of educating their kid. Is that a challenge like any other in Richmond County, and what would you or the school board do to kind of help parents along and bring them into the
Well,
process?
that is the toughest thing going on now. I'm going back to when my kids were in a particular elementary school at Rollins, and we were able to gather 975 PTA members with a school of about 600 students. So we were getting parents, grandparents, and really adding to it. But the lack of involvement, I saw a lot of this at, not as much at Seago, but at Butler. We had a hard time. I was chairman of the Athletic Boosters Club, and my sons were athletes, and trying to get people involved. I mean, it was just like pulling nails out. And I see it a lot more so now. I mean, we go in, and I attend a lot of the meetings where we try to work with parents. I think probably the best example I saw was out at Barton Chapel, and was talking to a woman who had 4 kids under 8. And she said, well, I can't come to these meetings. I work 2 jobs, and if I miss one of my jobs coming to a meeting in the evening for PTA, then we short on groceries. And the lady made a point, but to get them involved, particularly in the poverty situations, is very, very difficult. But we don't have really much better attendance at events, except athletic events in high schools. And I don't know whether it's a matter, I mean, I'm told over and over again by parents, oh, my kids don't want me there. And my kids said the same thing, but they relished the moments that I was there in charge of things, and particularly with the athletic program. And we raised a lot of funds and did a great job in doing it. And now my kids talk about it, and they think it was a nice thing to do. And of course, it kind of made them somewhat of a star too. You know, having Dad, you know, handling the breakfasts and things of that type, and the dinners and all. And I thoroughly enjoy doing all that. And I don't know whether the parents are just a little busier now. I don't really think so. I think they use that as an excuse, but they just don't tend to want to be involved. And they use the same excuse. My kids don't want me there. And certainly you've got to be at arm's length. You can't be right there trying to manage everything in their lives. But that and working with them, and we've been able to make some progress in the low performance schools and getting some parents involved anyway. And I really realize, though, that if you don't have that, you got to concentrate more with the teacher and the relationship she has with the student.
Well, this is a little bit of a different but maybe related issue. I know DFAX has moved over there to Bungalow
Right.
Road in a former school, I
Right.
think.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that has worked out?
I don't know really, and I was chair of the welfare at work program for a number of years, 20 years ago. Had my own office down at DFAX and everything, but I haven't heard a lot there, except that the school was vacant and we were glad to them use it. But certainly, yeah, they've got to do, and I think are doing a better job than they did in the past in relating to parents and trying to do more than just help fund things. And so I'm thinking that's come a little ways, but I haven't been involved in that probably now in 15 years or so. But it was a good program that didn't get much concentration after they had change in leadership, and which bothered me because I had the basic same counties in Georgia, and we'd go, and we had several that we went through special programs with. And one lady, I'll never forget, we were down in Millen, and she talked about that she couldn't have a good relationship with anyone because she was afraid it wouldn't work out. And she went through the program, and it was psychological to a great extent, and she got her education and then went to work for the mayor in Millen and did a real good job. But we took them to Atlanta for a work day there, and I enjoyed doing that. And I did that right after I retired, and it was interesting, but a lot of fun too to see them progress.
Well, I'm really excited about the possibilities that technology are going to bring, because I'll back up a little bit. Richmond County, typically is near the bottom of the state as far as academic performance. Now, with the school system's proximity to technology and cyber coming up, with this wave of cyber coming to the Augusta area, what possibilities do you see for the school system to improve?
Oh, definitely. Attended a few weeks ago the program out of the Technical Magnet High School, and the kids showed us stuff that I didn't realize. Young kids, and these were 9th and 10th graders that are part of the program. I mean, robots and things in that area that is amazing. And then to the other cyber programs we have in other schools, but the kids are responding to it. And I think one of the things that will help us educationally will be have programs that the kids can really identify with. And goodness knows, cyber and everything connected to it is something that they can identify with. I mean, it amazes me the way they play these video games and everything else. And these kids were able to build, I guess you call them robots, but machines that would do everything. And one little young man showed me how to operate it, and it was interesting. You could do almost anything with it. So I think I guess working with these kids, but letting them know that there's a great future. And these kids will, through Augusta Tech and all, end up with an associate degree when they graduate from high school. And that is strong. And we're looking at various other programs. I know the industrial type programs. We opened the new campus at Josie that is attended countywide. And they get you into the brick masons, the construction areas and things, and there's 6 programs there, mechanical. And I just think for so long we've kind of ignored those programs, and now we're looking back at, well, you've got this student that would go into cyber, you got this student that might go into auto mechanics or something, but they can leave there basically with being able to get a job, and that is countywide too. We bring them in. And one of the concerns there is cost of transportation. We probably spend more money on transportation than any other system, but it's the only way you get the kids to where you can. You can't put a program in every school. And Coach Laney's got special programs, and I think working with them in that way, and they attend a half a day there, and then they go back to their home school for the academic programs. And I think, too, that'll cut the dropout rate dramatically. And that's one of the biggest problems we have is dropouts. I mean, these kids, and of course the state doesn't give us any credit for these kids that come back and graduate, or those that take 5 years to graduate. They only give us credit for the 4-year graduates if they graduate in 4 years, which is kind of tough. And particularly if they're coming from a background where they're not that familiar with education or reading or anything in that order. It's tough. I mean, I personally think the courses are fairly easy, and they were when I was in high school too. But getting to the kids that need it really the most is critical.
Do you have any thoughts on the state charter school that opened a few years ago in Hepzibah?
I've talked with them several times, them requesting financial assistance, and we were very clear, and myself as finance chairman, that that was a state program and wasn't our program. And I haven't seen the success that I had, believe it or not, had kind of hoped they would have. And I know they let most of the staff go last year. I think 70-some% of the staff, and so don't hear a whole lot from them. But the city of Hepzibah, of course, has financed the property and the building, and I'm a little concerned whether that's going to really last. And I personally, I guess, being a little prejudiced, being a trustee of the system, that we do a better job with the system than you can do with and some of the schools in Atlanta I'm very familiar with that have been extremely successful. But then you get the right school in the right neighborhood where you got all academically inclined students, you can do it. And I think it's a control issue more than anything else. But I still prefer, going through the system. With all my kids, I would have never considered not putting them in a public school because I think they get the right kind of education. And where I live now, I don't know whether it would be that great or not. I attended Butler's with the state school superintendent a couple of days ago. And, it has changed so dramatically now. My oldest kids went there when there were almost 2,000 kids, and it was wall-to-wall kids, and the building itself was built very rapidly and was actually crumbling apart. A lot of the ceiling was coming in and all, but they got a great education, and they had some real good teachers, and all 3 of the boys graduated from Butler. And I look at it now. My youngest son comes back sometime for reunions, but not many of the kids do anymore. But I think it's what the kids bring into the school makes the biggest difference in the world. And I know my kids knew they had to perform academically if they were going to do all the other fun stuff like playing ball and everything. So we kept that right in front of them, and all 3 of them have done well and gone on to do good things. My youngest one was a journalism major and did 3 years here and 2 years at the University of Georgia, editor of the newspapers in both schools, and thought he was really going there. And I was a journalism major, and I got out pretty quick. Lewis Harris wanted me to work here. I was with the School Week edition editor, And well, I say one of the editors, all the high schools had an editor, and I looked at it and decided to go in business instead. And he was all set. He was going to the Atlanta papers. Chairman came down, took him to lunch on Tuesday. On Friday, they let 1,178 people go corporate-wise and froze the intern position for the paper. The first time in 78 years. He was devastated. Went on to Rome and worked for the independent paper up there. Came home, got married in December. His wife with a college degree would not work for minimum wage, so they gave her a nickel more. And that didn't last very long. And he came back in and worked with EasyGo in purchasing, and then he went from there to Tennessee and Alabama and Tennessee, and he just moved back to Athens with Carrier Corporation with the refrigerated truck division. He was over the air conditioning division in Collierville, Tennessee, outside of Memphis. They've all done well, but he does just as good there as he did as a journalist, and he was going to do everything I didn't do. He calls himself my unwilling clone, but he probably is more like me than the others. Doesn't look like me, looks like my wife, but he's done outstanding work there. So.
That's good. You mentioned the size of Butler a while back. You know, it being at one time more than 2,000 students. It didn't seem like
there was really not anywhere near enough room for them, and of course the old Augusta Tech campus was next door. And it was not part of Butler, and it later became, before we rebuilt Butler, it later became available to use for them, but they didn't really need it then. But once we built Cross Creek, and it took from Hepzibah and Butler, and it really probably took some of the best students from both schools, and it's become superior as far as the school, really, that. And
in the past few years, the school system has had to think, right sizing, consolidating and trimming and all that. So is there any of that? Is there any more of that ahead of the school system?
Will be, yeah. Like Rollins, I mentioned, it will be Seagull Rollins when it opens as a K through 8 school, and we've done that in several of the schools, but we've still got several that will be considered to close.
Would you be willing to tell us which ones?
Well, really, the one that we've talked about in my neighborhood really is Southside, which is getting smaller and smaller, but we closed 2 this year, Jenkins White and Craig Houghton. Now, Craig Houghton, and I just spent a lot of time down there parking cars for the fair. We lease that property along with the streets and the farmers market, so we do our options club. And so we're going to move the data processing division down there because we don't see, but we were down to 280-something, 290-something students, and you just can't operate a school efficiently at that level, and particularly when it's built for 700, 800 students. And the same thing with Jenkins White. Now, we did put Jenkins White, the first through third graders that aren't on grade level, go there for part of the day, or some of them all the day until they get to the point they can go back to the home school, and we do bus them back and forth. I think it's probably been the best program we put in as far as trying to get these kids up to grade level. And if they're not at grade level, they just seem to, the chart showed us, they go a little lower. They make progress, but then the superior students keep getting higher and higher. So there's a big world of difference. It's so dramatically. When you're doing a chart, you can see it so much, every year. These kids maybe go up 10%, these kids go up 25%. So it's dramatic when you see that. And these are the kids that are going to need to get a good job, and unless they've got a good education, they're not going to. And so you can see them making progress, particularly the little ones.
You always seem to be pretty busy. I don't know, have you had time to campaign this time around?
Take time. Not as much as I should probably, but next week will be very busy. I'll be putting a lot more signs out and stuff like that. But I just got my mail out done. Got it to the post office yesterday, the last part of it. So that was very time consuming, and very few events, though. I got the endorsement of the Committee of Good Government and spoke at several other events. Got one for Saturday, which is out on Lumpkin Road, and I'll go there and get a little get a little viewing, but the one I attended last week was on the other side of Highway 1, Deansbridge Road. So I just asked the people to, if they knew anybody in my district, to vote for me. So, and that was interesting. That's at Henry Brigham Center. So every chance I get, I do. And I really miss some nights at the fair parking cars because the event's going on. Well, one was a board meeting, but the other 3 nights I missed. But I put in my weekend duty about 20-something hours the first weekend, and next week, the last weekend, about 16 hours, and the weather got us there. So, but I enjoy doing that, and I've always been a go-getter. I stay busy. Well, then I've been retired now, 27 years. I got an early buyout, so I have the time to do the things I really enjoy doing. I hadn't slowed down a lot. Don't intend to. Somebody might catch me if I do.
Well, I've probably asked this question several times, but I guess Richmond County is mainly, you are competing with Columbia County, and Columbia County has just such a stellar reputation, which, they work on that pretty hard. Richmond County is not as bad as, sometimes the reputation
I agree
seems
with
like
that.
it is. But how do you compete with a system like that?
Well, you really have to understand what you're working with, and I think we're doing a good job of that. But to come up academically, and I've got 2 sons in Columbia County, and got 1 grandson still in school. But you start with what you have, and of course, public education has to educate all. And we just work from the standpoint that we know we've got some academic problems, and we just keep working on them, and to trying to keep the ones who are do well academically, make sure their programs are there. And I think we've done that with the magnet schools. And I was on the board in the early 80s when we built the magnet schools. I know my high school principal from out of Augusta, Mr. Partridge, extremely critical, and he talked to me just like I was still a student, even though I was trustee on the school system. And he said, we actually took his state championship science team, went to A.R. Johnson, the whole team, and he said it's just not fair, and it probably really isn't. But then again, I look at education as you've got to work with the top kids just like you do the bottom kids and give them an opportunity. And certainly that has happened in our magnet schools, all of them. And we're seeing that really now. And we had a bad delay in building the last magnet school there at the old Augusta Tech area campus, because they couldn't get moved till they got everything straightened out over there. So, but those kids are starting to come along. Of course, academically, they've been in the top classes all along, and that's a mixture of people from the whole county. So I think it's expensive to educate them in magnet schools and transport them all over, but the successes they have there, and I always take that as a point of pride that I was there when it was begun. And we get questions all the time. One of the state legislators didn't like the idea that kids couldn't participate in, say, athletics at their home school. And of course, it's impossible. I mean, if you go to Davidson, you're going to spend most of the afternoons there doing something extracurricular, something. So, and that was very important when we built the schools, that they had to basically declare they wanted to be part of that type system, and if they were athlete, they had to choose between being an athlete. And we've since added golf and tennis and a couple of individual sports that they could schedule around and all. But team sports, there's just not enough time to do it. And I'm glad to see the attendance is always improving. We're hoping to add some more at Davison as the building comes along. We've got the property across the street, the old Elliott's funeral home that we've had cleared and all, and we may make that part of the campus there.
What is enrollment like at Davison?
It's about 820, I think it is.
And how many more do you think you would?
Oh, we would probably add classes.
Okay, more
the
classes.
earlier classes, and then too, of course, moving some of the classes over to the different campus would allow us to put more in the senior level classes too. But it's extremely successful. And A.R. Johnson, not quite as successful, but extremely successful. And I see the kids there that walk up to the medical college to take courses. And anytime you go down Laney Walker there, they're walking. And you got to feel good about that, because when they get out of school, they're going to be ready to make a living and all. And I think that's something that I've always looked at is education, is preparing them for life after school, whether it be high school or college. And you see the success that you get there. And then you go back to the beginning. Unless you get them right at the beginning, they're not going to make it to that level. So I think we try to handle both of that. And Dr. Pringle's done a good job. And I think it's one of the strengths of the old school system. We work together well as a board, which I've been there when that didn't happen. And certainly my wife served quite a while when that did not happen. And now everybody's working together, and I think it makes a big difference. And I think,
are they working together? Because I hear that, maybe some board members are actually supporting, other candidates.
I've heard that too, and I think probably a minority of one. But and there's a big difference there too, since he's come on board. But I understand he's going at least 2 or 3 and raising funds and things in that area. Now, the interesting thing there is with the 3rd district, I understand he's raising funds for Eubanks, which is going against 3 minority candidates. So you look at that situation. But he's kind of a wild flower in the garden, and I worked with him very closely when I first came on the board. I would probably be in his schools at least two or three times a month. And then near the end of his term at Tubman, I would go up and always judge academic Kaplan, which was in the other building behind Tubman. And I don't know how he found out we were there, or I was there, but he'd always want to talk. And he didn't come, he'd just send messages. And the last time we did this, we'd gone over probably close to an hour, because some of the schools were late getting there. And I told him, I said, I got to his office at a few minutes after 2, and I said, well, I've got a 2:30 appointment. I'll give you 15 minutes. And he didn't like that, and actually didn't want the 15 minutes even. So that's always been interesting. And he has not been as radical as I thought he would be coming on the board, but particularly Dr. Pringle did not fire him. Well, I say fire him, would demote him to a teacher again if he wanted to stay on. But and it's going to be interesting how his wife performs in her race for the legislature. But his idea really, and he doesn't speak a whole lot during meetings, but when he does, it's something way off from where we're going or what we're doing. So it's kind of radical, I would say. And I consider myself one of the strong conservatives that just wants to make the system work. And I think we have, really. And I've dealt with a lot of situations, and of course problems with having a superintendent who became ill and then came back. And I like Dr. Robertson very much, but he wasn't able to do the job when he came back. And one of the board members who's no longer there, Frank Dolan, said, well, we can't just put him out to pasture. And I said, well, no, we didn't. We gave him a full year after his contract was up, but we wouldn't give him a full 3 years. So, but Dr. Pringle has made a lot of difference, and we're hoping that we can continue to keep her. We do one smart thing, I think, before she gets to the last year of her 3-year contract, we extend it by 2 years, and we'll give her another 3-year contract, which makes it work. And she seems to be very happy. I think she's seeing some real progress, and I see her around the folks from Atlanta where she worked for so long and all, and I think she's taking pride in what she's doing. So I'm hoping. I guess she's just starting the 2nd year of her contract, so we'll be probably looking at that later.
So that would run out in about a year or so? if it's
Yeah,
not
this is,
extended?
she's starting her second year of the 3-year contract. Mhm.
Jack Padgett, candidate for Richmond County School Board, thank you for being with us today.
Glad to meet with you, and hopefully I'll get your endorsement.